De La Soul. De La Soul is dead. Here you see De La Soul kind of destroying their own myth before it had a chance to define them. And I say that because this album was released in 1992, which is really like the golden time for hip-hop. By the time you get to the 90s, you're starting to see definite styles of hip-hop start to emerge. And one of De La Soul's points was to try to, especially on their debut album, to focus on more positive sides of things. Because, as gangster rap was coming out, there was a lot of negativity that was associated with the rap music that was giving it a lot of visibility, but also was kind of giving it a bad reputation. So De La Soul was one of many groups at the time was trying to put a more positive spin on it. But that positivity that they put out in their first album was starting to work against them. They were sort of getting stereotyped as kind of like hippies, and that really wasn't their point at all. So the clever thing about De La Soul is Dead was that it does have these little skits that you start to see in albums in the early 90s for hip hop. And in the case of this album, the skits are sort of this ongoing story about this group of bullies that find De La Soul album and are listening to it and commenting as they go through. So it gives De La Soul an opportunity to make music that is inherently theirs in their style, but also comment on it in a way that kind of, acknowledges the negative attitudes that have been placed on them for being the kind of music that they were. That was in some ways counter to what was more popular than hip hop at the time. Now, like many other early 90s hip hop albums, this album is musically very dense as far as sampling goes. You probably couldn't get away with it, at least not financially today, because the amount that you probably have to pay out to all these different samples to make these layers would be, too expensive. But like a lot of other albums from that era, the density of sampling allowed the individual samples to not be heard, but the music to transcend the use of that kind of collage approach to creating music. And initially, the album was pretty divisive. It was seen as a little bit kind of scattered. And in some ways, I think the skits in this album, there's a justifiable criticism that you could say that they got a little bit distracting. They kind of took over at a certain point and became more the focus than the actual hip hop. But now, in hindsight, this album is really seen as a very courageous reinvention of what De La Soul was setting out to do from their first album. So in some ways, you could see the album De La Soul is Dead as a self-destructive act that actually preserved De La Soul moving forward.